When you get Xfinity Internet, Flex is included free, and finding what to watch on TV is now as easy as popcorn. This is a way better way to watch.
Go to Xfinity.com, call 1-800-XFINITY, or visit a store today to get a great offer on internet and add Flex for free. Restrictions apply.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in. Dr. Judy WTF here, and I'm the founder of the Mind Map System for Healing Human Disconnect, the Be the Cause Mind Map System, just by way of introduction. And I am the also the head of the Psychological Healing Center. And I know we have a caller, so I'm kind of rushing the introduction. And thank you so much for bearing with all the technical issues. I'm hoping that everyone is now able to hear me properly, the volume good, the lighting good, and the technical good. So tonight's show is about adult children blueprinted to turn against the parent by the narcissistic parent. Very, very painful. I've been seeing case after case of situations like this. I'm working with people where this is a real issue for them. And there's nothing like divorcing your narcissist and then having your own child be the carbon copy of that ex and then turning against you. So let's start by taking the call. Hi, you are on the air.
Actually, Dr. Judy, they hung up, so keep going.
Okay.
Call back.
Call back? Okay, so then I have a little more time to dissect the topic. And as most of you know, we're going to be doing lots and lots of mind mapping and looking at blueprints because I'm a systems thinker. And that's my goal with you, is to help you to think like a shrink, meaning to not depend on therapy for months and years, but actually to have the analytic ability to play psychological detective with yourself and the world around you and see things clearly. Because when our lens of perception is cracked, we don't see ourselves clearly, we don't see the world around us clearly, and of course we then multi-generationally blueprint our very own children to copycat our psychopathology with the emphasis on psycho. So why am I doing this topic? Because there's a lot of pain around it. And I'll just bring up case study number 9,999. We'll just call it that because I like the number 9. And the 9 and the 3s are my special numbers because you can see that the mind map is divided into 9 panels. The first 3 being the wounds of childhood, the reactions we have to these wounds, and how we blueprint or encode the past. And this section is called the past encoding. Now the middle is the chaos and the defense and the breakdown of today, with the opportunity, of course, to break through. And then we've got shifting out of all this mess. And once we could see straight, once we could take down destructive blueprints that no longer serve us and are no longer shadowing over us and distorting our psycho-perception, we can paradigm shift and create synergy within ourselves and within relationships and recode ourselves and be the cause of a better outcome for our life. So let's see what the Freud is going on with children, adult children, who now attack the parent. It's almost like you breed a child, you're supposed to breed a child with all the right ingredients. And of course, if we don't give our children the right ingredients, we can't be too surprised that they're going to turn against us. However, this is a special case where the child, adult child, I'll say, identifies with the narcissistic parent and then becomes like the narcissistic parent against the other parent. So in a general sense, how does this begin? I'm going to start by describing an article on the dynamics of parent alienation by Sherry Steins Saidi, article in June 2017. So parent alienation syndrome is a term coined by Richard Gardner in the 80s and describes a condition generated in the context of divorce or child custody disputes, in which parents create an alliance with their child against the other parent. The child, influenced in part by the alienating parent, contributes to the dynamic by denigrating the targeted parent. So the child, the adult child, begins to demean and devalue and destroy that other parent. So in essence, the adult child now takes on these narcissistic traits. And why does that happen? Well, I'll give you some examples of what I see in the treatment room. Sometimes this happens because of their own childhood wounds, what the parents bring to the psychological table to their own children. And how is narcissism formed? Narcissism is a lack of empathy and a system gone wrong where the parent, one or both, put their own needs before the need of the child. Another way narcissism is formed is when parents spoil rotten their child, control their child, and turn them into mini-me's of their own agenda. For example, if daddy wanted to be a football player but didn't quite make it, he may want to encourage his son to play out the role that he could never fulfill. So no longer is the child free to do what he or she wants. He is now being coerced and rewarded and demeaned if he doesn't comply with the parent. Now, this could take shape and form by the mother to the daughter, for example. Let's say the mother wants to have the daughter take care of her. She might groom that daughter to be her little servant and comply with all her SNAP demands and reward her for compliance and make her the golden child for this compliance, and then kick to the curb the other children since they're just not really on her team. And so you could see that this is a system gone terribly wrong. And when one parent and another parent get divorced or separated, what happens is that the child usually takes their anger and resentment out on the parent that is probably the healthier and more empathic parent, because the love there is not conditional. The parent who is more narcissistic is more the conditionally loving, I'll put that in quotes because it's not love, the apathetic parent who uses the child to fill on their own agenda. And so the child needs to keep that bond. With the other parent, they usually have the bond, and with the parent that they're trying to please and hang on to, they've got to work harder to keep that bond. So they may more easily fall under the spell of that parent. And so how does this happen? Sometimes the parent uses money to control and manipulate, money in the form of inheritance. Sometimes they use position to control and manipulate. If you comply with my overt and covert wishes, then one day you will be the president of my company. They may force compliance by rewarding that adult child for making the other person miserable. And in essence, what happens is that this adult child becomes the flying monkey against the other parent. And can you imagine how painful this is and how triggering this particular child is to the person who is at the effect of this horrible system gone wrong? And this is a call-in show, everyone. Please do feel free to call in. I know there are a lot of people out there who are thinking, what the Freud is going on? I thought I divorced my husband. I thought I separated, divorced my wife. And now my daughter, my son, they're acting just like my husband did, just like my wife did. Where the heck is this coming from? And I'm telling you the truth of where this is coming from. It's coming from the blueprint gone wrong, specifically in the case of children that go on the narcissistic side of things rather than the empathetic side of things. They're spoiled, meaning they get rewarded for unearned behavior. So they may be handed cars and favors and so on, and they're handed these objects or these favors without earnership. And so without earnership, they don't develop a sense of responsibility, and this spoiling makes them grandiose in their view of themselves. So in other words, they are groomed to have too much power in the world. And so when they have too much power in the world, they might power over the other parent. And really, really destructive, really for everyone, because even the adult child doesn't benefit, because eventually they their system implodes on them, so that even though they might get away with it for a while, eventually they'll leave a lot of carnage behind, and they may end up being in horrible relationships and be the person of the horrible relationship and end up in divorce and infecting their children. Remember, this is a multi-generational system gone wrong, meaning that the blueprint comes from mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, great-grandparents, and all the way back. And there are many layers to this. There are the 5 wounds that I speak about: physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, control smothering, and emotional neglect. And then the narcissistic wound, which is along the lines of neglect. It's really more on the further end of things, where the parents do not have empathy for the child. They're apathetic. They don't feel for their own children's pain. And so the children become objectified and used. And that's what I mean by the flying monkey, because no parent in their empathetic mind would use a child against another parent, because children have the right to love both their parents. And even though parents may not get along with each other, it doesn't give the other parent the right to turn one parent against another. And so I really would love to get some call-ins, because I know that this is a very, very unfortunately common theme. And certainly I'm talking about it today because it's shown up so often in my treatment room. And we've got to expose this so that if you are a parent, you know how I talk a lot about parents demeaning and devaluing their own child, but now we're talking about how the system turns around, and now the son or the daughter is demeaning, devaluing, destroying, discarding their own parent. Now, one of the areas that this shows up in is in the elderly. So when parents get older and the system goes way wrong, the adult children may take the opportunity, if you will, to punish a parent by really emotionally neglecting them. And elder abuse is not uncommon. We see a lot of older people in nursing homes, etc., and children don't visit them, or worse, they take the opportunity to mistreat them and fiscally abuse them and and emotionally or even physically abuse them. And this is in retribution, or somehow they're being used as those flying monkeys to pay retribution against a parent, the other parent that was poisoned by the one that they're aligning with. And I'm hoping the person who did call in calls back. And if not, then you can ask questions in the chat room, and my lovely tech support will ask me those questions, and then I can answer them. However, I'd rather hear from you directly. So also, I want you to know that we offer free consultations to everyone. We also offer a free PDF of my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. Thousands upon thousands of copies and PDFs have been given out now or purchased from Amazon, and have helped people to connect the dots and think like a shrink, and go through the system of healing so that they can have a very structured pathway, a yellow brick road, if you will, from the past problems through deconstructing them to paradigm shifting. So please feel free to avail yourself of a consultation. We have a really wonderful staff of people who have learned the mind map. I've personally taught the system to my staff, and that's why we're able to offer this at various fee scales. So please do take advantage of these free consultations. So let's go back to the adult child who has been blueprinted to turn against the parent by the narcissistic parent. Oftentimes you see this when one parent has a lot of power and control. Maybe they have a lot of money, a lot of fame, which is also so usually going with a lot of money. They may be powerful leaders in the community, so they can really have a lot of control and personal control. I think, network to everyone, I'm trying to read that little message. Can they hear me, Tony?
Yes, and I have some questions from the chat room.
Oh, please ask away.
Okay, so it's a two-part question. First, Renee says, thank you for bringing this up. I lost 4 children, but then it says, can my children change their mind? What could I do? So I don't know if that was pertaining to...
I think that's a great question. What can you do? Well, what you should never do is put down the other parent, which is really hard not to do. Now, I'm assuming, Renee, that you have some level of contact, or even if you have no contact, sometimes it's what you don't do that matters. So you don't demean, devalue, you don't do that. You always have an open door policy so the children can come back to you. You can stay in communication, and you can psychoeducate them. That's what I would do. I would actually psychoeducate them and send them articles like the one I have in my hands, When Children Become Weapons, When Families Become Toxic. These are some pertinent articles, and please do send your children a copy of my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, and let them know that this is not their fault. However, it is their responsibility to heal, because if they don't heal, they will continue to blueprint this to their own children. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking, because again, the children usually take out their aggression on the more empathic parent, and it's the soft-hearted parent that takes the brunt. And a soft-hearted parent is the one that has the open door policy, and it's usually the narcissistic parent that controls the child and says, if you don't comply with giving your mother or father a swift kick in the butt on all levels, then I'm not your friend. You know, it's worse than that, but you get the gist. So it's really, really important that you keep this open door policy and let them know that you love them, and let them know that you've preserved all their good memories. And do preserve the good memories, because it twists and turns. And also do preserve their memorabilia, because when they have children, it might feel awfully nice for them to get the lock of the hair that you hung on to, or the special baby books that you hung on to, or the little clothes that you kept safe so that their children can get it. So I think that in every single human being, there lives a spark of light. Even though that adult child might feel very, very cold, there still has to be, on some level, a little bit of that humanity. And so you keep humane, you keep open-hearted, and also do protect yourself, because I'm not saying open your heart and let the knife through. That's not what I mean. I'm saying keep open-hearted so that if that child does contact you, you don't cold shoulder them. Because remember, in a psychological blueprinted way, they are not the cause of part one of their life. They're living at the effect of what they were blueprinted with. And so certainly if you look at panel number 3, for example, I'm going to go into my metaphors, because the mind map is rich with metaphors. And if you can see this DNA strand, the blue strand represents the father, and the pink strand represents the mother. And the mother and the father are supposed to be bonded. That's the DNA. And the little bonds that keep the ladder strong and support the growth of the family. So if you look carefully at panel 3, you can see the metaphor for the children growing up, and if they don't get the proper support, if they're not in a family system where mother and father are bonded and on the same page with their parenting rules and roles, if they're at odds with each other, what's going to happen is panel number 4. So if that sustainable system doesn't hold up over time and becomes unsustainable, you get panel 4, and now these DNA strands are unraveled, which is a metaphor for the human disconnect and the divorces, separations. And you can see all the children fallen off of the ladder and hurling out into outer space. And so if we look at panel number 5, you could see that panel 5 represents defense mechanisms. And so the narcissistic defense mechanism is sort of, the way I like to put it is, if you can't beat them, join them. So if daddy is richer, better, more popular, more known in the community, more loved in the community, has a great face in the community, let's join his team. And then the defense mechanism would be to become more and more like daddy, and then hurl things and project things against mommy. So in panel number 6, you could see clashes and bangs and the hurling. And so the father might say something like, you know, mom's been a terrible mom, and we don't know if she was or wasn't, but in any case, the PR against the other parent is not good, gets that adult child riled up against the other, and pretty soon they gang up on that parent. It's really, really, really painful and sad. I hope I answered your question. You're more than welcome to call in. And are there any other questions or call-ins?
No calls, but several more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Maria says, how do I get out of the role of a public pawn?
Of a public pawn? Wow. A public pawn. I wish I knew a little bit more about what she meant by a public pawn.
Well, Maria, if you might, maybe you can explain a little bit better, and I can go to the next question, and maybe she can rephrase that.
Yeah, like I want to understand this public pawn. Okay.
Great. Well, then, M-A-N, does this happen in families with both parents are narcissists?
Yes, it can happen in families where both are narcissists, and then it becomes a pissing contest, if you will, and who's going to sign up the children faster and better and hurl more demeans, values, and destroys against the other. And so that becomes a really big old clash bang party. And you could see in panel number 6, everything is breaking down. And this is really serving no one, because when you start powering up, when you start using power and control over another human being, you're missing the key element of our humanity, which is connection and empathy. Okay. And when we've lost our way, when we've truly lost our pathway in life, we will use power and control to beef up our self-esteem. And then that power and control will be used to enroll people into your camp, so to speak, your ism, your special brand of narcissism in this case, and then create a war. And this is where families split. They really create split in the children. So one might be one's golden child, and then the other one is the other's golden child, and then sibling rivalry ensues because there's no unity here, as you can see, and everyone is going down the tubes, and there's no sibling coherent relationship, because the parents kill off the support system to support siblings from getting along, because they're so greedy and needy themselves that they would rather get all the supply for themselves than let the siblings get along and have a peaceful and productive communication amongst themselves. So it's a very selfish system, as you can see. Any other questions?
From Taffy says, I think my eldest daughter has a borderline trait. Should I send her the book? Should I attempt to have her arrested because she committed fraud when she had me arrested? So that sounds like...
Well, okay. So if she's gone so far as to have you arrested, I always say protect yourself. And even though you might want to wake her up and make her aware and so on, in some cases, it's better not to poke the bear, because it seems like if she does have borderline personality disorder, which is where it's a personality disorder that is at the core very, very, very deeply wounded in the department of abandonment, and the sense of self and the emotional regulation is way off, and the self fluctuates. And so you don't want to necessarily, as the hated parent or the projected on parent, I'll say, you don't really necessarily want to be the one to bust their system. So if you can have someone else send the book who is not really involved or has a better relationship with your daughter, that might be the better way. Ultimately, it almost feels like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But definitely, I prefer to try to do something rather than do nothing, but not at the expense of yourself, please. Okay? Because it's not worth for you to throw yourself under the bus, even for your own child, because it's really not necessarily going to help your child in the long run. Any other questions?
No questions other than that so far. I'm sure
Okay, maybe I should stop answering the chat room questions and encourage people to call in.
That's right. Oh, actually, we just had somebody pop in, so we have a call.
Okay, great. You're on the air. Hi.
Hello?
Yes, hi and welcome. Thank you so much for calling in. What is your name, please?
My name is Charles. I'm calling from New York City.
I really appreciate you taking the time to call in, and tell me, how is it that you relate to this topic?
Well, I am an adult child of a narcissistic mother and an enabling father.
Okay.
My parents are both deceased. I awakened to this after my mother's death. I think my subconscious mind allowed me to look at what I had been living with my whole life and did not actually.
Today, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. DirecTV Stream brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
You might have noticed a change in your neighborhood lately. Yep, Sprint stores are now T-Mobile stores. Now that Sprint is T-Mobile, you get more coverage, value, and benefits than ever before. We've invested billions to bring our 5G from big cities to small towns across America. And great coverage is just the start. From high-speed mobile hotspot data to weekly deals and giveaways, our customers get tons of great benefits. Head to your new T-Mobile store to learn more.
Qualifying service and capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com.
And Dr. Judy, I had a boyfriend. I hadn't had a relationship in 10 years prior. And I met this guy. This was totally engaging to me. And, he went through the whole thing. I knew he was narcissistic, but I didn't really have the full appreciation for what that meant.
Yes.
Until he killed me with a hammer. And that was an awakening, if anything could ever occur.
So when you said, I couldn't hear the word before, but something about a hammer, what did he do?
He attacked me with a hammer.
He literally attacked you. So it wasn't just a verbal attack. It was a physical attack.
Yes, ma'am. My life flashed before my eyes.
Wow.
Well, I lived it to awaken to a much bigger grief. And that was, the story took me back to my parents and something that I could never really fully see, but totally did see. And it was your show, one of the first that really sort of helped enlighten me to this, phenomenon. And, it starts just like a little cover. And as you keep uncovering and uncovering, before you know it, you've got a dinosaur, a mastodon. And your whole life, it's like taking your house and throwing everything onto the floor and having to just reorganize it all over again.
Exactly. And that's why, you see, you bring up a point I want to elaborate a little bit on the aspect of proactive versus reactive chaos, because chaos is just that. It takes you down. Okay, you see those bombs broken, flying all over the place. And so that's what I call being at the effect of childhood wounds. And of course, your ex-boyfriend also had his share of childhood wounds. For sure, I know this. For sure, you know this. For sure, the listeners know this. You don't have to have a PhD to know this, because he had such a hole in the soul that his way was to project all his pain onto you. And what did you deserve that you did to get a hammer attack on you? Okay, so you could see the cracked lens of perception, right? Short of you trying to attack him and his defending himself, that's pretty distorted, isn't it? That kind of response to you.
Well, it took me by surprise. But one thing I understood is that I had been surrounded by this kind of behavior my whole life, and it was normalized to me. And I was feeling like it didn't bother me that much. And I think that was the key. The fact that his behavior and his manipulation didn't bother me. And the evening that he took a hammer at me was one when he humiliated himself. He passed out trying to do something that he couldn't do. And I didn't ridicule him, but he woke up feeling very shamed. Next thing I know, he was throwing tools in the house, and then he had a hammer at my head. And then he held me captive in the house, hostage in my own home for like 4 hours, until I finally got him out. And that was really pathetic. It was very sad.
Scary.
But it was,
But see, this
so
is
it was a wake-up call.
No kidding, right? And this is how it sneaks up on you, is because it's normalized. And the way I put it in my book and also in the treatment is that parents set the bar. So if you grew up in an alcoholic family, for example, it may be normal to be drinking a lot of alcohol every night, and getting drunk may be normal, and hangovers are normal, and DUIs are normal, and driving drunk is normal until somebody gets killed or maimed, okay? And so whatever we're doing within our families as parents are setting the bar for our children. And so when you meet somebody that's familiar and familial, you now feel that that's your norm. And so why is that bad? Why is it so bad? It doesn't feel good, but that's not that bad. It happened in my own family. And that's where it's so subtle. That's where you have to wake up. It's like the way my favorite metaphor is that a fish doesn't know that it's swimming in dirty water until they get into cleaner water, and then they feel differently and they see clearly, and they get a kind of like their own aha, of course, fish, whatever ahas they could get. But you understand what I'm getting at here is that you don't see it until you see something new, a glimpse of the light, a glimpse of clarity, a glimpse of the truth. And that's what the mind map system is geared to do, is to pull you out of the old system. And rather than have it take you down, we, meaning the therapist and the patient, take it down together. Because it's only when the system is taken down that we can rebuild from scratch and recode into health. So that's what we're doing therapeutically, is we're ripping it down so that you cannot any longer build on it, and you cannot any longer use it as your blueprint for life.
I've got a positive twist on this as well. I mean, at least for myself.
Okay.
Growing up, my parents weren't alcoholics, but my mother was very invalidating. She was very sadistic. She was a rager. My father was very enabling. He also had very little empathy. He beat me as well, And there was physical abuse, at least physical abuse when I was 8 with my mother. I felt a predatory nature with her, and I probably buried the rest of that. So much had gone on. I was on my own living. I was sleeping in my car at age 16. I had to go out, and I knew at that point that I only had myself, which is good, but it's also bad not to be able to ask for help. But I finished high school. I went on to college. I got a career. I got 3 master's degrees. I had a wonderful career in New York, but now I see the resilience that I had and what I got, and my upbringing or lack of really gave me a sense of power and a sense of self. And I really did a lot on my own. I learned, I'm lucky that I was able to develop a sense of self. I went out, I was a rock singer in Detroit. I came here, I had a career. I was involved in the art community, without even really knowing how badly I had put up with. And, I also relived, being gay, you think that you deserve the bad treatment. That was part of it, I believe. And then living AIDS and living through all these, they overshadowed the whole concept of coming from narcissistic parents. Although, my parents, even though I was living here and people were dying around me, never once did they ask me, how did I feel? How was my health? How was I being cared? Nothing.
Yeah.
And
that's the apathy.
Yes, never supporting me, never concerned, never, having a boyfriend never had a name. They were always your friend, and that was an invalidation in itself. And yet I still went on, and I still valued my parents. I would go home. I knew enough, even though I didn't understand everything. I knew enough to protect myself. I knew enough to, help hold up boundaries in the end. But I didn't really understand how bad it was on their end until, my dog got killed on a visit home. My sister, I don't know what happened with him. Horrible things started happening when I would go home to visit, which really was an eye-opener. After when I found out how malignant this was, it really was very devastating to me. My sister who was the closest.
I was just curious if one parent ever started to turn you and enroll you against the other parent. Did that happen in your family?
No, that didn't happen. They stayed together. My father was so bonded to my mother. He was her handmaiden till the day she died, and he died like a year after. And it's funny, I had a harder time processing him than her because it was supposedly, but then I could see the whole family. Once you start seeing the patterns, you see the wave of it throughout your entire family system.
Yes.
And see all the lost, all the ones that disappeared, the nameless ones, every corner there were some. And the funny thing is, very few will agree with you. I have only one cousin who really sees what I see. The rest are in denial. But my family is riddled with suicides and addictions and horrible, horrible things throughout.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's really
called
sad.
normal, right? That's called normal. So go ahead.
But if you're normalized to all this and you still survive and you can come out, that's a real sense of power and a real sense of gratitude.
Absolutely. And that is what I call curse by design, because you were thrown all of these curses and you took them to grow and strengthen yourself. And rather than, again, being at the effect of it, you became causal and you took the opportunity to work on yourself so that you were the powerful agent of your life. And so this is a little different than the theme that I started, but it's similar in that both of them turned against you. So it's not like one turned the other against you. In this case, it's a real example of both your parents as attacking their own child. It almost sounds like one of these animals in the animal kingdom that eat their own children, right? But now they're just psychologically eating them alive, and it's a psychological devouring and demeaning and discounting, and
But that happened. My mother did humiliate my father in front of us. I mean, she would do that, and he would not respond. He would put his head down, and it was really pathetic and sad when that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And my sisters, they were patterned. They became very, they married men that they really abused, and my brother married two women that were abusive to him. And it just, there's such a strong correlation when you start to look at that. And yet now, even though I've learned what I've learned and I'm processing what I can, it's still very difficult. This is a difficult point in my life. I have to face some things. I have to have a lot of what I've done. Maybe it was wrong. Maybe, I have to look at my part in this. It's been tough. My life has been in chaos for a while, coming to terms with this. But, I've developed a sense of spirituality going forward. I really think now, I used to think older that no, I think this is only a portion of our existence in the world and in the universe. And I have a healthier sense of moving forward right now. So even my time right now, there is a sense of being valued, looking for something of value and learning and growing in other ways. So I haven't given up. And I think that it's given me a new sense of resilience with this. And, I don't know if I'll ever find forgiveness, but maybe acceptance and something in myself that will be much kinder than what I got from them and help.
And a lot of, I just wanted to say, a lot of people rush to forgive, and I'm a fan of forgiveness is earned. And sometimes when we forgive too quickly, we forget to hold people accountable, and also we forget to forgive ourselves for being vulnerable and not knowing and being unconscious. So I think always the first person to check in with and have empathy for is yourself, because without self-empathy, I don't think it's possible to much empathize with other people. So the work starts within, and I really appreciate your sharing this. And please know that if there's some unfinished business and psychological files that you feel that you want to close, then truly we've been doing this work for a long, long time, and it's no longer just a pretty little picture on a poster card or up on my wall. The system really, really has been transformational to so many lives. And so if you feel that you just want to be done with it and get all the poison out, just please reach out. And again, that free consultation, take advantage of it. So thank you, Charles, and just keep being that beacon of light. And yes, thank you for the positive spin, because as Charles mentioned, what happens once you wake up and you see that you've been living in this house of charades where you bought into a lot of lies and misperceptions and misconceptions, and these misperceptions were hand-me-downs from multi-generations, and in this case we're talking about blueprinted by one of your parents. That's how children are. We buy into the lies that our parents tell us. So if they tell us you're unworthy, if they tell us that you're a failure, if they tell us that you're stupid, if they tell us that you should never have been born, well, those are the people we look up to, our parents. And so it's interesting how true Dr. Alice Miller's statement is, which is that the child would rather take the guilt and the shame and the brunt of it and blame and shame him or herself rather than hold the parents accountable, because they can't see that the parents are accountable. They can't see that the problem stems from.
Today, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. DirecTV Stream brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
The parents, all they can do is look in the mirror and say, Daddy must think I'm stupid because I am stupid. And Mommy must think that I'm unlovable because I failed to please her. And Daddy thinks that I shouldn't really be entitled to any allowance because I don't deserve anything good in life. And this goes on and on and on. So this is where the problem starts, is that when we're young, we're impressionable. We imprint what our parents are saying to us, and then there goes that whole blueprint, and then that creates reactions and encodings and chaoses and breakdowns and defense mechanisms and then breakdowns. So we've got to morph out of all of that stuff. And so the mind map truly is a pathway where we take you on the journey, and so that at the end of the journey, you're not vulnerable the way you used to be. You can't be fooled, and you're seeing clearly through your own eyes and not through the cracked lens of perception of the past. So if there are there any other questions? Comments?
Am I still on, Dr. Judy?
Yes, you're still. Do you have any other comments that you want to add?
Yes.
Okay.
I just say that, as much as we can, for me, and for, I belong to a group of other, children, adult children. And one of the things that I know is that as much as we know and as much as we feel and as much as we've seen how, and appreciate what has happened to us and around us, many of us still have that love for our parents and our families. And it's still very difficult to separate, even though we are separated in no contact or they've deceased. It's appropriate to say, I can love them from afar and I understand what happened.
I can understand that.
Yeah. And to really, and I think that it's not, for some people, it's just not possible to just separate and just write them off. I think that even though they're not, it's important that you protect yourself, but I think there's something built in us that always will have us love them to some degree.
And
they will always
I just want to say that some people can and do, and if you can't love your parents because they've been so cruel and abusive, then don't push yourself to love your parents, because then I have a video that I suggest everyone watch, and it's called Grieving the Parents You Never Had. And sometimes what happens to us is we get into this idealistic mode of what we think our parents, what a parent is, and we idealize them, and then we forget ourselves that we've been neglected and abused. So I think in a Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, highest consciousness way, I think if we were at that level, we could say, okay, I empathize with my parents because they too were injured and they're at the effect of their parents. So I see that, and then there's so many people who truly are. And I want to get back a little bit into this article. So I'm gonna take it from there. And there are no right answers, Charles. Okay, so thank you for calling in. I'm just gonna continue a little bit more. And I appreciate you calling in.
It was a pleasure talking with you, and I just have so much gratitude for your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much for that. Appreciate it. Okay, so really there are no right answers here. So how are we supposed to feel about parents that abuse us and throw us under the bus and physically hurt us and emotionally neglect us and just don't give a damn? Well, people have different boundaries. Some people go no contact, some people go low contact, some people never forgive, some people strive to forgive. So it's a very, very personal journey, and nobody can tell you how to be around this. But I want to go back into these toxic families and how the adult child can trigger the wounds of their own parents' childhood. So when the son or daughter is demeaning and devaluing mom, for example, mom might feel like she's back into her original family. And even though hubby's gone, oh my goodness, the system lives, the system reigns, and the system triggers. So then one thing that you could do to trace this back is to see, what is your adult child triggering in you? Is he or she triggering wounds of neglect? Is your child triggering wounds of demeaning yourself? So that's one thing you can do. One thing you have to do is you have to understand that you have a right to say no, even to your own child. And sometimes they're acting this way because you fail to set limits with your own children. And this is a very touchy thing because, now you might want to be setting limits, and those limits should have been set a long time ago. So as I talk about in my therapy, if the parents are too loose, you're going to get one set of problems. If they're too authoritarian, I think is the word. I always get authoritative and authoritarian mixed up. If they're too harsh, that's not good either. And so when it comes to how you can create a healthy relationship with your child, the blueprint has to be right. And I go back to attachment theory. John Bowlby: eye contact, skin contact, mirroring, attunement. And if you give your child all of that, and if your spouse or partner gives your child all of that, chances are that the system will go much more correctly. It'll be on a good course, and all of this fallout material won't come back to bite you. So just a few more things. How do you know that you are in an abusive relationship with your own child? If you end up feeling bad about yourself after most encounters with a family member, in this case your son or daughter, there's probably a good reason for that, and one worth looking into. So you do not have to swallow it. You don't have to take it. And the thing you can do for yourself is, in this article, I like how they organize it, written by Crystal Rapol, October 2019, and reviewed by Timothy Legg, PhD. So this is how they recommend that you respond. Some people, as Charles was saying, will forgive. Some people will choose to cut off their child completely by limiting contact, like really limiting contact. Sometimes this contact is just zero, no contact. So what do? You decide what you want to do, and you decide and identify what you want from the relationship. So if you want respect, if you want your boundaries respected, I say spell it out and tell your adult child exactly where your limits are. And if they can't do that, then it just depends on you and how far they go. And then at a certain point, you've gotta put yourself first, whatever that means to you. So here's some other suggestions. Practice detachment. Keep separation. You don't have to get involved in every little trigger that they press your buttons on. Make a plan. If they're so toxic, then decide how to avoid them. Brainstorm ways to change the subject. Give them very mild conversation that's object-oriented instead of deeper, meaningful conversation that might turn into trigger moments. Decide what you're going to share and what you'll keep private. When someone's out to get you, it's not a good idea to share with them, because whatever you share with them can be used against you. And finally, don't try to change anyone. When you're dealing with a son or a daughter that is turned against you and they've already decided and taken a stance with you, you might have to just distance yourself from that, and don't try to be the therapist of your own child, because it's a little too little and a little too late. If you can psychoeducate them, great. If they wake up one day, as I said, keep an open heart, open arms policy, only if they can respect enough of your boundaries that you're not going to get hurt in the process. And by all means, look at your own childhood wounds and what your family left you with in terms of your negative core beliefs, and see where your son or daughter is pressing on those buttons, so that you can go to your therapist or come to the psychological healing center and heal those triggers. And then when they push those buttons, they won't activate the same way they do now. Last of all, I want to remind you that a free consultation is available. The PDF is available, and so is the video, the 9-panel Mind Map Journal to Healing. And you can purchase that. It's a download. You can code in, and it's a really great way to learn the mind map system. And it's best paired with watching the video, reading the book, and having a therapist to guide you through this. So I want to end the show with what I like to usually do when I remember to do it, with a Shrink That tune. And this tune is called Hurt, and it's by Christina Aguilera, and it is reflective of the theme that we've been talking about. Seems like it was yesterday when I saw your face. You told me how proud you were, but I walked away. If only I knew what I know today. I would hold you in my arms. I would take the pain away. Thank you for all you've done. Forgive all your mistakes. So this is a child saying to the parent, I forgive you. I forgive you. There's nothing I wouldn't do to hear your voice again. Sometimes I want to call you, but I don't know if you'll, but I know you won't be there. So, children are, even when we're adults, we always want to give it our all to have that parental love. Sometimes I feel broken inside, but I won't admit. Sometimes I just want to hide because it's you I miss. And again, sometimes it's not the you that you miss that is your actual parent, but it's the parent that you wish that you had, and the parent that you miss as a kind of a desire for the parent that they should have been. And I really, again, encourage you to watch that episode called Grieving the Parents That You Didn't Have. I'm sorry for blaming you for everything I just couldn't do, and I hurt myself. So here this child is desperately trying to seek the love, attention, and beg their parents' forgiveness. And it's back to Alice Miller. No matter what our parents do when we're children, especially, we will try our very best to please them and appease them and make sure that we take care of them, because they're our source and they're our protectors. And the bond that we have with them is actually a bond that we need to physically and emotionally survive. That's how strong we have to fight for this bond. However, now that you're an adult and you have ways of separating and individuating, you don't have to hang on to toxic bonds. So I just want to leave you with that idea that once a bond is toxic, whether you're bonded to a toxic child, a toxic spouse, a toxic boss, a toxic anybody, if it doesn't serve you, you'll be vampired. You'll end up being the shell of the person that you were, and you'll actually be less than, not more than who you are. And that's when you know that you're bonded to a toxic bond, toxic person. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Good night, everybody.
And if you've enjoyed my show, please subscribe to my channel. If you need help, please call the number below. And if you've enjoyed my show, please subscribe to my channel. If you need help, please call the number below. And if
the air we breathe, the water we drink, the soil that grows food for our families. These basic elements are essential to healthy, happy lives. America's corn growers think so too. Across the country, they're pitching in every day and doing the work to produce food and fuel that is healthy in a sustainable way. Go to ncga.com to learn more about how corn farmers grow a more sustainable future for us all. That's ncga.com.